What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Vegas 75. We have a main event matchup of two top five middleweight fighters here in Cannonier and Marvin Vettori. Both of these fighters have a lot of similarities. If you ask me, this is a fight that makes a lot of sense. The thing that stands out most about these fighters, unfortunately for them, in my opinion, was their performances against the champ in Israel Adesanya. I felt that both these fighters left a lot on the table. Not to take anything away from Izzy, we know his striking can really stifle his opponents, but I really do believe that these men had more to give. And they let the moment get to them. We'll see if one of these men can get a victory here and can eventually push towards another opportunity there. You guys also know that I feel the UFC middleweight division is the most shallow division in the UFC, and I really think there's no arguing that if you want to go over the top 10 list of each division. But a lot of the same old names in this division. Dricus du Plessis, I really don't feel that du Plessis is even on the level. He's a knockout artist that struggles with his cardio. We'll see if he can take out Whitaker. I don't think he will. Maybe Whitaker gets that trilogy fight against Adesanya. If Cannonier can get a win here, that would obviously be very big for him, coming off the Strickland win as well. Strickland finally getting back in the win column against Amavov. We'll see if he can get a victory against Abis Magomedov. But again, a lot of the same old names here. A lot of the new blood in this division, they fell short as of recently. Roman Dolidze took an L. Andre Muniz took an L. And you guys know I want to see that trilogy between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya, but it just doesn't seem to be a fight that the UFC or even a good amount of you guys don't want to see that fight. I don't understand why you guys try to point to the fact that Alex Pereira doesn't want to cut the weight, which is complete BS. He's always made championship weight. He's never had an issue with the weight cut. I understand he has a big frame, but he makes the weight, and the trilogy fight was just such an exciting fight that was left on the table. We'll see if we see that trilogy match down the line in the light heavyweight division. I say we won't see it because Pereira is going to lose to Jan Blachowicz, the former light heavyweight champion, who's going to use his grappling to absolutely take over that fight, in my opinion. Sorry to go on a little tangent there, but just to give you some background on this card here, we're going to jump into the first fight here in 1 second. Just a reminder, we're hitting up the recaps of every Ultimate Fighter season 31 episode that's going on right now between McGregor and Chandler. We're hitting the recaps of all of those. They're getting pumped out the night of, so if you guys are watching the show, come check here in the channel after the episodes, and we can talk about what's going on with these shows. I've been excited about that. Other than that, you guys see that I'm pumping out a lot of different content. Had that recent video come out about the matchup of a UFC flyweight fighter against an NFL linebacker. I'm really curious your guys' thoughts on that, and I'm curious what you guys thought about what I had to say in that video, so check that out as well. And we have the timestamps here. Of course, you could jump to any fight throughout this entire card, and I'm excited. I hope you guys all have a great week. Let's jump into this first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we take a look at a flyweight matchup here between the UFC newcomer Felipe Bunes. He'll be taking on the UFC veteran Zhalgas Zhumagulov. If you're not familiar with Felipe Bunes, he is the current LFA flyweight champion, maybe more accurately the former LFA flyweight champion, as he now looks to solidify himself as a UFC fighter. This isn't a fighter that's a young and up and coming dude. I mean, this is a guy that's in his 30s, comfortably in his 30s. He has about 19 pro fights. He's been training with the Pitbull brothers. You guys know the Pitbull brothers over in Bellator. He's been training with them for a long time. Maybe more importantly, he's been putting in some work with Henry Cejudo as of recently. You guys know, I think that carries some serious weight, and he's coming off quite possibly the biggest victory of his career, where he had that first round knockout over Yuma Horiuchi, the Japanese fighter there, had a wicked knockout there, showcased his diverse striking. He's a fighter that definitely has some L's under his resume. As we said, I mean, 6 losses. This isn't a fighter that's coming in with an immaculate record. You take a look at some of his losses, some of them are respectable. I would say the majority of them are respectable. Getting submitted by Jussier Formiga. I mean, a real true veteran, a wizard down on the mat. Other than that, battling over in ACA, fighting over in Chechnya over there in Russia and whatnot, fighting some serious dudes. Who knows what the drug testing's like against those types of guys also. But also those fighters, for the most part, had some very, very solid records. So those fighters look legit. So, at least as of recently, those losses not looking the worst. Early on, a couple losses that maybe don't look the best, but it was early on. in his career. And I do believe that he is without a doubt the best version of himself right now. Coming into this fight, you got Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who has had a real tough time getting the job done. A lot of tough split decisions haven't gone his way. Split decision losses against Charles Johnson and Jeffrey Molina. Got knocked out by Manil Cape. Had the victory against Jerome Rivera. Jerome Rivera, you guys know how I feel about Jerome Rivera. I feel he's a very low-level fighter, so I don't put too much merit into that victory there. And if you really want to put Zhalgas under the fire even more so, he was actually getting teed off on early on in that fight before he finally, corrected things there and got the finish. I do like the fact that Zhalgas has been putting in work over at American Top Team for some time, training with some of the best fighters on planet Earth in his respected weight. He's a veteran. Can he go out here? Maybe you just mix things up enough to get the job done. I'll give you guys a quick hint. He is the favorite here. There's a very realistic possibility that Zhalgas goes out here and takes control of this fight, having the experience in his back pocket. Maybe he can go out there and do something similar to what we've seen some of those Russian fighters do to Felipe. But you know what? I like the fact that Felipe is coming into this fight with about a 5-inch reach advantage. He's much taller. He's going to have that length advantage. I think that he can get the better of the striking in this matchup here. He's young and hungry. You take a look at some of their wins and losses. Felipe Bunes only submitted once out of his 6 losses. Whereas Zhalgas only having 1 submission victory, I feel like that's more of a realistic avenue, or one of the more realistic possibilities if Zhalgas was to get the job done, or a route that he would need to go. And there's not a lot of success that we see in that route. So if Felipe can avoid getting caught in a power choke or something like that, or being dominated down on the mat, I think that Felipe can take this fight. I think there's a very realistic possibility he gets the better of the striking. Zhalgas will be the aggressor here, but Felipe will be much more diverse, and I think there's a realistic possibility he gets the job done, and a realistic enough possibility that I'm going to be siding with him here, even though he is the dog here. He is right now a plus 145 underdog on Bovada.lv. He opened as a plus 130 dog. So action coming in on Zhalgas and Zhumagulov. People like the fact that he has, that experience in the octagon. I understand it. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. Like I said, not really much of a submission threat, but he's strong in the clinch. He can press his opponents, push them up against the cage. And maybe that's even an overstatement too, because I do want to note this as well. In the UFC, Zhalgas and Zhumagulov only with a 19% takedown accuracy, even though we kind of know him as a decently well-rounded fighter. I wouldn't say his striking is the most impressive, but that's probably his bread and butter. But also take note on this. Zhalgas and Zhumagulov landing 4.87 strikes per minute while absorbing 5.37. So showing defensive flaws again, which will favor Bunes, who is a diverse striker. Give me the UFC newcomer here. It probably will be a tougher fight than I'm making it seem to be. I do respect Zhalgas, and that experience edge that he has will pay dividends, but I feel comfortable taking the newcomer here. I think the young and hungry newcomer who's been putting in work with Henry Cejudo will be able to keep this fight standing and use his striking and use his footwork to get the job done. I'll say he wins a decision. Over to the bantamweight division, we have a striking affair between the South Korean Kang taking on Cristian Quiñonez, the tough Mexican fighter who has some pretty solid boxing skills. We've seen that on display, specifically over his last 2 fights. Got the victory on Dana White's Contender Series over the Chinese fighter there. And then in his UFC debut, had a big-time knockout victory over Khalid Taha, who is a dangerous striker in his own right. I like the length that he has for this division. Kang also has some pretty good length for this division. So both rangy fighters, both fighters that really favor their striking. I would say that Kang may have a little bit of an edge as far as the kicking game goes. Having that Taekwondo background, we know that he throws some nice leg kicks and mixes up his kicking attack overall pretty well. Where I think that Quiñonez could really have some success is making this a dogfight, digging deep and using his boxing skills, closing the distance, and really just using his boxing attack to land some big shots and really make things ugly in there. I like the power that he possesses. Now, Kang has shown to have a very a sturdy chin over his career. He's 35 years old. He's already had, 27 pro fights, and he's only been finished via knockout once in his career. So he does have a strong chin, but I do believe that Quiñonez can land on him not at will, but land on him enough and make things ugly in there and do enough to score a decision here. And I'm going decision mostly based on the fact that both of these fighters are extremely durable and tough. Out of Quiñonez's 21 pro fights, even though he's 27 years old, already has 21 pro fights, only finished via knockout twice, which is not the largest number there either. So I have a feeling that this fight will go to a decision, but I do believe this will be a very I don't want to say ugly. I believe this will be a bloody fight. I think that these guys will bring it, and you also keep take into consideration that Kang hasn't been the most active fighter over the past couple of years or so, but even as he comes in off longer layoffs and not averaging the most fights per year, he still comes in sharp. I think there's no question that he stays in phenomenal shape and is spending a lot of time in the gym, so I expect that from him here. He's coming off a solid win over Donna Baccarel, but I like the youth of Cristian Quiñonez here. I like the fact that he'll be very hungry. I like the new blood here. I think that he takes this fight here against the Korean. Let's go take a look at the betting line here. Cristian Quiñonez opened up on Bovada at a -185 as he was the favorite. That line to me did seem a little high. Now he's now a -175, so action coming in on Kang. I think that is reasonable, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised if you see that trend go a little bit more so. I think that Quiñonez should be maybe around a -150, 155 favorite. So that line a little off. It probably will correct itself. You keep an eye on Quiñonez's boxing in this fight, though. I think that it pays dividends for him to get the job done here. Now, this is going to be a fun one here. Ronnie Lawrence taking on Daniel Argueta in the bantamweight division. Daniel Argueta, of course, coming off the Ultimate Fighter a little bit ago. He lost on the show against Ricky Turcios. Ricky Turcios did go on to win the show overall, so that doesn't look the worst that he lost to him, even though Ricky Turcios, his UFC career hasn't been going as good as he probably would have liked it to coming off that show. But nevertheless, Ricky Turcios is a respectable opponent. And, Dan, at the time, I feel that he's a very much evolving fighter. At the time, he was more of just that wrestling type of fighter, right? He has to refine his overall game. He has to continue to work on his striking and look to improve on ways that he could use his wrestling to just really be successful in an MMA fight. And I think that's what we've been seeing from him. Since that loss to Ricky Turcios, he went out on the regional scene and was putting in some work. Victories over in LFA 3 times in a row, taking out Diego Silva, Marion Santos, Rodney Mandala. Now, he loses in his UFC debut against Damon Jackson, a very respectable fighter. That fight took place in the featherweight division, and there was a massive size advantage for Damon Jackson. The thing that came to mind when I watched that fight was, I can't wait to see Dan Argueta get back to work in his natural weight class in the UFC. And we saw what he did to Nick Aguirre, just absolutely dominated him with his wrestling in that fight. And, now looks to take on, obviously, a more dangerous fighter in Ronnie Lawrence. But I think that Argueta is very live to get the job done here. Ronnie Lawrence, a fighter that can definitely grapple in his own right. We've seen him go out there and take advantage of fighters that are lacking a little bit in that department. He's gone out there and really exploited their grappling. I mean, that's what he can do. And then as far as his striking goes, he's shown to be a more diverse and dangerous striker than Argueta. I think you can definitely say that. He's a more polished striker. Argueta still has to work on some things. If you remember in the fight with Argueta and Damon Jackson, when Argueta had success late in that fight, really piggybacking off his cardio and his wrestling, that's what he's so good at. When he had Damon Jackson breathing heavy and had opportunities to land on him on the feet, he resorted right back to his wrestling. That's something that he has to work on, right? He could have really teed off and have potentially finished Damon Jackson in that fight. So Argueta's striking is not the best. I'm going to edge Ronnie Lawrence on the feet. But I'll tell you guys what, though, and Dan Argueta, a fighter that you think of him as just being such a short guy because you saw how he was excuse me, you saw how Damon Jackson towered over him in that fight. But again, that wasn't his natural weight class. He's not necessarily the tallest guy, even for the bantamweight division. And he won't be able to rock his Spice Girl high heels, in the octagon. Of course, can't wear shoes in the octagon. And I know you guys are always getting these sponsored ads on Instagram as well. I don't know why I'm always getting them, because I told you guys on Tinder, I put 6 foot, right? I'm a 6 foot on Tinder. I'm really 5'11", 5'11 and a half or whatnot, a little under a half. I'm in between a quarter and a half, but I'm 6 foot on Tinder. I don't need those Spice Girl shoes, and I constantly get those damn ads on Instagram. Stop putting them on my feed. But Dan Argueta, check this out. In his natural weight class here, I mean, he's only going to be he'll be at, about a 1 inch height advantage here against Lawrence. I'm not really worried about that in the least bit. And when you take a look at the reach, he's actually going to have about a 1.5 inch reach advantage in this fight. Now, I don't want him heavily relying on his boxing and his striking. I do want him mixing things up. We saw in Ronnie Lawrence's last fight, when he was facing off against a guy that was much more polished in the grappling realm, Said Kakhrakhmonov. Kakhrakhmonov had success in that fight using his grappling and mixing things up. So I want to see Dan relying heavily upon his wrestling and his cardio. Of course, it's an MMA fight, does have to mix things up, but I think that's his route to success. And even though I initially was on Ronnie Lawrence, as I was analyzing this fight and breaking down tape, the more I watch tape, I have a feeling that Argueta is going to take this fight over with his cardio and his wrestling. I think he's really coming to now. He has these full camps, coming into these fights, and he's an underdog coming in right now. He opened as a plus 115. He's now a plus 120. So action even coming in on Ronnie Lawrence. I think people believe that Ronnie Lawrence can use his wrestling to stuff the takedowns and use his striking there. But I think Argueta is going to be a lot. I think his pace and his pressure is going to be a lot. And I think that will be the edge in this fight. And I do think that Argueta can land a little bit at will as things get ugly and he's pressing him against the cage or, blocking him down and things are getting ugly in there. But I don't want to see him using his striking in a finesse type of situation in the middle of the canvas there. But give me Argueta. Give me the dog here. And you know what? Argueta, one of the better follows over on IG, always posting good stuff. A fighter that's put in a lot of work over at Jackson Wink over the years and, putting in work with Mike Winklejohn. I expect the striking to continue to be worked on there. I think he gets the job done here, and I think there's more value on his underdog line, to say the least. Another flyweight matchup on the card here. Denise Bondar taking on Carlos Hernandez. Carlos Hernandez, coming off Dana White's Contender Series, had that victory there against Daniel Barraz. A decently respectable victory, got the job done, got the decision victory there. And then as he made his way into the UFC, had a matchup against Victor Altamirano. I didn't believe that he won that fight. And I think if you took a look at what the vast majority of the MMA community thought, they thought that Victor won that fight. So it was a close fight, but he probably should have took an L there. Then he gets submitted rapidly fast by Alan Nascimento, who we know is a very polished grappler, but still, I mean, the way that Nascimento went out there and handled him wasn't a good look. Also take into consideration that Victor Altamirano just got played with in his last fight too as well. So, things not looking as good there, even in that competitive fight that he had. Victor's stock has been down, so that fight not looking as good. Denise Bondar, you have to take his last loss there with a grain of salt, right? Because he was injured. He was submitted by Malcolm Gordon. On paper, that's going to look horrible, and he wasn't necessarily looking the best even before the injury in the limited amount of time that fight lasted. But he did have an injury in that fight, and he's getting another opportunity here to clear his name. He doesn't want to be known as a guy that loses to Malcolm Gordon. You guys know that is one of the worst stains that you could have in the MMA world. Being a fighter, a loss to Malcolm Gordon, it's a really horrid look. And Bondar, 30 years old here. He's actually going to have a 2-inch reach advantage in this fight, even though he's 2 inches shorter. So has that going from here. Has about what do we got? Double the amount of pro experience, 20 pro fights compared to Carlos Hernandez's 10 pro fights. Not fighting the most stiff competition over there on the other side of the world. It's not like he's been out there, fighting against some of these tough. Some of these tough Russians, some decent opponents, but overall, I would say that the resume is a little padded. But I'll still side with Bondar here. He can mix things up. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. Carlos Hernandez still has to prove more to me anyway. Now there's a limited amount of lines on this fight, but what I'm seeing right now is Bondar is roughly opening up around a plus 130 underdog. So Carlos Hernandez, the favorite, roughly a minus 150 favorite or so. But that line should move around a lot, as it's a line that's just beginning to kind of unravel here as I'm recording this. I'll take Bondar to get the job done, and not saying that with an overwhelming amount of confidence. And I think that this fight could play out similarly to what we see a lot in women's mixed martial arts. Like, it's going to be a fight that's a little bit back and forth, and I think there's a lot of question marks here. But give me Bondar. So Raoni Barcelos, coming off a devastating knockout loss against Umar Nurmagomedov. No shame in the loss to the opponent there, but the way he was put out, definitely something to keep an eye on here. He's 36 years old, and there's been a rapid decline in his mixed martial arts career. You guys know he was once the dark horse, or one of the dark horses in the division, if you ask me. I mean, he's a fighter that has a wrestling pedigree, a superior jiu-jitsu pedigree. His striking is very, very good as well. He's lightning quick, constantly switching stances. I mean, he was talking about him like in past tense as he's gone. He's still here, but he is a fighter that really has a lot of tools and can mix things up very well. But again, I mean, this is a fighter that's won one of his last 4 fights, I believe, fighting some decent competition. But, I think that this is a fighter that's been, going to war in the gym for a long time. He's up there in age. You guys know 36 in this weight class is, it's a higher number. It's not the heavyweight division. 36 in the bantamweight division. You're going to lose a little bit of that speed. And we've seen it. We've seen it from him defensively. His defense is really what's gone the most, in my opinion. You see his head on the center line at times as he's throwing these strikes, and he kind of freezes and he's there to be hit. Miles Johns, Miles Johns, a fighter at one point in time who I had higher hopes for as far as where he was going to go with his career. Has the wrestling background, he can work off that. He has decent power in his hands, but a fighter that's really, how do I say, man, just a guy that's kind of fortunate if he's able to just hang around in the UFC. Maybe that's a little harsh. I mean, he does have that ability. I mean, so far, we'll take a look at what he's been doing. He's been finished a couple times as of recently. Was submitted with an arm triangle choke against John Castaneda. Was finished by Mario Batista. I mean, decent names. He's gone out there. He's knocked out Anderson Dos Santos. Just had a decision victory over Vince Morales. Had that really tough fight against Cole Smith. That was a fight where it was a real grinding type of fight. I had an official play on that. I'll never forget. I was in the bar. I had a great time that night. Had a lot of solid plays in that card. But that was a fight that played out very closely, and I was very nervous as I went to the judges' scorecards. And I'm not that high on Cole Smith, and you would have liked to seen Johns use his striking more so in that fight. I think that Raoni Barcelos, if he shows up resembling anything of what we've seen from him when he was a little bit more towards his prime, I think this is a fight that he should handle. I think that he gets the better of the striking. He has potential to really land some impactful shots and maybe shake things up. I think he can take a back, pull off a submission. I think there's a realistic possibility he pulls off a sub in this fight. But the big question mark is how is his chin going to look if Miles Johns is able to stuff some takedowns, use his wrestling and the fact that he's more in the prime of his career. He's the younger fighter at 29. If he can use that strength and grappling ability defensively to keep this fight standing and maybe tee off a big shot on Barcelos and maybe get a knockout victory in this fight, I think there's a possibility that could be the case here. Overall, though, I still got to side with Raoni Barcelos. He has just shown, even though not as of recently, he has shown to be a fighter that has pushed his career to another level than a Miles Johns. Miles Johns hasn't shown to be on that type of level, in my opinion. Raoni Barcelos, 36. He's a hungry dude. Hopefully, he fights this fight intelligently, and he can try to take the back of Johns or just mix things up and not take too many big shots on the feet. And I want to see him push the grappling. Again, I know Miles Johns can wrestle as well, but I think Raoni Barcelos is a better wrestler and a superior jiu-jitsu player too. So give me Barcelos. Let's go take a look at the betting line here. This should be an interesting one. Raoni Barcelos right now is a minus 230 favorite. Opened as a minus 175 on Bovada. People still respecting the abilities that he has showcased throughout his career, even though he's coming off some tough losses as of recently. Action coming in on Barcelos here. So if you want him or you wanted him, you might want to have grabbed him at that minus 175 line, or at the very least even a 185, 195, 230. You might be pushing it. I think he does get the job done here, but there's some question marks going into this fight, so be wary, be careful there. Hey you guys, real quick, if you're looking to work with me for my official plays for this card, this is a card that I really like. We have some solid spots here, so just letting you guys know that is always there for you guys. If you're interested in working with me for my official plays, shoot me a message, whether it's Instagram, email, Twitter, whatever it is. I'll send you over my pricing or what deals we can work out, and I'm always here. I'm all ears. Another Ultimate Fighter veteran on the card here, Zach Pauga, taking on Modestas, Bukauskas. This fight taking place in the light heavyweight division. We know that Zach has had some fights in the heavyweight division, but the light heavyweight division seems to be very fitting for his frame. It's his natural weight class. He's coming off a big victory in the weight class, or maybe I shouldn't say a big victory. A solid performance, but against a lower level fighter. The ever so fun to watch Jordan Wright. He went out there and he got the job done against him, and in fact, didn't get the knockout that a lot of people were thinking that he could have gotten that fight based on the defensive flaws from Jordan Wright. So, but did enough to get the job done. And then before that, got knocked out against Muhammad Usman in a fight that he was winning before getting that big shot landed on him. That sloppy wild hook landed. So defensively, Zach Pauga has shown some flaws. Does possess some power, possesses some decent power. He's decently polished up with his striking. Modestas Bukauskas at times has shown to be a little slow out there. But overall, I've been impressed with him for a couple of reasons, right? This is a guy that's been cut from the UFC, brought back in. He goes off to the regional scene and just continues to work and pull off victories and get more opportunities to fight in the octagon. This is a fighter that's only 29 years old. Obviously, he has a giant frame for the division, which is always a good thing. I believe he is 6'5". 6'3", actually, not as tall as I thought, but a 78-inch wingspan. He is a solid fighter. He's very stout as well, solid legs. We talked about him being slow at times, and we've seen it affect him, right? When you think about what Khalil Roundtree was able to do, right? Hyperextending his leg. He was just a little bit stiff out there, and had his leg damaged in that way. I don't think that Pauga is the same type of threat. I think Pauga will be more of a threat to just land a power hook to the chin. So he has to make sure he's defensively sound here. But I think that Bukauskas is the fighter that is kind of more on the up and up right now. I think that his potential and his ceiling is still much higher than a Zach Pauga's. When you take a look at the fact he's only 29 years old. And real quick, we'll talk about some of his recent work. Coming off that big victory against Tyson Pedro, he was an underdog in that fight. You guys know Tyson Pedro is always so hyped up on the betting lines. Knocked out Chuck Campbell in Cage Warriors. Had a victory over Elite Chadwick before that. And then you're talking about his UFC losses when he was cut. Jimmy Crute, Michal Oliasejczak, and Khalil Roundtree, all three respectable fighters, and had a victory against Andreas Michailidis before that. And that was that weird fight where, Michailidis was leaning against the cage. They pulled the cage up behind him between rounds. That was a weird one. But nevertheless, got the job done there. I think that Bukauskas still shows to be a well-rounded threat, but his striking is his bread and butter there. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a knockout against Pauga. If you're telling me that Muhammad Usman can land a knockout shot, I definitely think that Bukauskas can land a knockout shot. I think that Bukauskas will land some heavy leg kicks as well. He throws very heavy leg kicks, and really all his striking abilities are pretty heavy. All the attacks are pretty heavy. He's a thunderous dude, and I'll side with him in this fight. I will side with him in this fight. And Pauga's no slouch, but I'm liking Bukauskas here. Bukauskas is the favorite. Opened up on Bovada at a -175 line. Dipped down to a -195, a little bit of back and forth, actually, up, down, and is now back to a -170 line. So people kind of having some mixed feelings on that line there. In the light heavyweight division, there's definitely a lot of variables that could happen in that fight. I think there's a realistic possibility we see an under happen, some type of finish, either way in this fight. So I wouldn't want to put. I wouldn't want to tag next to Bukauskas' name. That's too high there. I would definitely want more of the 160, 170 type of line. I'm not touching that up at the -190 if you like him there. Otherwise, I see more value on the Pauga if you're grabbing him, +155 if you're getting a line like that. So you monitor that line. Just understand that it's a dangerous fight for either man, and there's a lot of variables there. Two big guys that are going to be throwing down on the feet. So and two guys that have shown to be vulnerable to being finished in a couple different ways there. So that'll be a fun one. But give me Bukauskas to get the job done. In the women's flyweight division, we got Tereza Bledá, a.k.a. my boy Chris that used to live down the street, taking on Gabriella Fernandes, who's coming off a tough UFC debut. In fact, both fighters coming off tough UFC debuts. They both take L's. Gabriella Fernandes losing to Jasmine Justadovicius there, was taken down in that fight. Gabriella Fernandes is a fighter that has showcased her having a decent jiu-jitsu background throughout her MMA career. I mean, she's a fighter that has pulled off a decent amount of subs, 3 subs out of her 8 losses, just under half of them there. Also has a knockout victory. So half of her victories were coming by way of finish coming into her UFC debut there. But you need to see her work on her overall game. She has to be able to keep the fight on the feet more so, and just polish up a couple other things. She's 29 years old. And then you got Tereza Bledá, who, coming in to Dana White's Contender Series, she was a big favorite in that fight. She did get the job done, started off a little slow, but you saw the ability that she has, and you see why people are kind of high on her, especially when you take into consideration the youth of Bledá there. She's only 21 years old still, which is crazy. She's 21 and a half years old. She's going to have a good reach advantage in this fight as well, about a 4-inch reach advantage. She is roughly 3 inches taller. She has a great frame for the division. One thing that I'm not crazy about when I watch her fight, one thing I want to see her work on is I want to see her have a little bit more urgency as soon as the bell rings. She does start off a little bit slow. She's very confident in her overall skill set, so she kind of just floats. She's like water, if you will. She kind of just is willing to go wherever the fight takes her. And I think that she should try to be a little bit more of the hammer and just control the fight from the very moment that bell rings, and really focus on what she feels that she does best. I want to see her just have a little bit more urgency when this fight kicks off. And she lost her UFC debut, as we mentioned, but you have to understand she fought one of the top up-and-coming fighters in the game, in Natalia Silva. Natalia Silva is a beast. She's extremely well-rounded, and she was just a tough matchup for Tereza. And when you take into the consideration that Tereza is still only 21 years old, I do believe that the ceiling is very high for her. She was talking about how she was going to be the youngest champ, and she'll hold gold one day. And props to her for that. And I hope to see that come true for her. I mean, it's awesome to see these young fighters. I love watching these young fighters like Raul Rosas Jr. It's so cool to see them in the UFC so early and see how far they could push it. But Tereza is very far from that point at this point in time. She needs to prove much more. She needs to go out here and dominate this fight against Gabriella Fernandes. I want to see her taking this fight down to the mat. I want to see her using her ground and pound early. I don't want to see her playing around. I don't want to see her on her back. I want to see her on top, dropping down ground and pound. If she wants to try to land some shots early on the feet as well, but just take control of this fight and just jump out the gate, right? Jump out the gate. Don't be one of those horses, that's a big favorite that's just kind of lollygagging at the gate and then try to take it late around the lap. You know what I mean? I want to see Bledá out the gate, take control of this fight from the very get-go. Let's go take a look at the betting line. She, of course, is a big favorite. She's a -275 favorite, opened as a -260, dipped to 250, came back to 275. So we monitor that line, but you definitely should and do expect that she's going to be a big favorite going into this fight, no matter how it goes, even if that line trends back towards Fernandes, which I don't think it will. I think that Bledá will actually settle in even as a -300 favorite. How about that? I could see that line going up. There's plenty of time for the line to move, and I could see her settling in the lower -300 range. I think that people will start to get hyped up on her again, and when they realize how young she is and how physically imposing she is, and she's a well-rounded fighter and all that. So you'll see the confidence from her, and I think that line will trend that way. So we'll keep an eye on that. But give me Tereza Bledá, and I think that she dominates this fight late. I think she starts to take over this fight a little bit later. Like I said, a little bit of a slow starter. And Fernandes has never been finished throughout her career right now. I won't necessarily bank on a women's flyweight fight for us to see a finish there. But you understand that also out of 6 of Bledá's wins, not a lot of fights, not a lot to go off of. But the majority of them have come by way of finish, and she's diverse too. 2 subs, 2 knockouts. So she's a diverse finisher as well. But probably a decision victory where Bledá takes over late and really works some ground and pound in this fight. Back to the flyweight division we go. We got Jimmy Flick taking on Alessandro Costa. A big fight for both men here. Both men coming off some tough losses. I want to start by talking about Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick, an interesting character, right? 32 years old. He's right in the prime of his career. But the way that he enters this fight, it's not really reflecting a guy that's in his prime. There's some serious question marks about Jimmy Flick. If you guys remember, had a big time performance on Dana White's Contender Series. He submits Nate Smith, then he submits Cody Durden in his UFC debut, and then all of a sudden he retires from the sport. And if you followed him on IG, he's sitting in his hay-filled bed. He's taking his fingernails, popping little holes in the mattress, taking some of the pieces of hay out of his bed there, putting it in his mouth. He's twirling it up and seems to just be cracking a couple Keystone Lights and just watching the fights, and started to even step on the teller's toes, started doing the bricks picks. He was kind of dabbling in the teller's world on IG, on YouTube, whatever, trying to do some MMA picks. And all joking aside, it's just kind of a big question mark, right? When a guy's in the prime of his career, had all that momentum, and then retires from the game, you have to question where he's at mentally and what's going on in his personal life. I think there's definitely something going on there. And then he makes his return, and he gets steamrolled against Charles Johnson, who's actually been struggling a bit as of recently. Not to say that Charles Johnson's not a good fighter, but Jimmy Flick, I believe Jimmy Flick, the former LFA champion as well. It might have been an LFA champion. Either way, Jimmy Flick, though, he's been a little bit of a one-trick pony throughout his career. I think that's safe to say. You take a look at his 16 pro wins, 12 via submission. I mean, this guy really is a specialist down on the mat. No knockout victories, and if it goes to a decision, he's only won one decision. And he's a guy that goes out on his shield too. He's been knocked out 5 times. In those 6 losses, he's been finished 5 times, which that doesn't really add up. So they're missing a fight there. Probably was maybe one decision there. They didn't track one of the fights here. Sometimes these lower level fights early on, they have trouble getting the records there. But you got a guy in Alessandro Costa who has 6 submission victories himself, but more importantly, has never been finished via sub. So he's shown that he's kind of a well-rounded fighter down in the mat. I think that his grappling is decent. He comes in phenomenal shape. That's for sure. He's working on his striking as well. I think that there's potential for him to have some success against Jimmy Flick on the feet. Flick is a little slow there at times. Cerebral, but a little bit slow and plotty with his movement. I think that Costa may be able to take advantage of that as well. I think that this is a fight that there's some big time question marks going into this fight. Jimmy Flick right now on Bovada.lv is a plus 190 underdog, opened as a plus 135, rapid movement right towards Costa's way. So you got to kind of look at that a little bit. Opened as a minus 175 favorite, did Costa, now a minus 230. So there might be some insider knowledge there, people that know what's going on with Costa, that he's young, hungry, and looking to get that first W here. He might be way more, yes, how would I say this, sacrificial to the game. This is a guy that's really in the game right now, fully devoured in the game. We know that he's been putting in work with Alexa Grasso as well. He cornered Alexa Grasso, and Grasso just took the belt, been surrounded around that little circle there as well. They've been doing some good things over there. And I got to side with Alessandro Costa too, I'll tell you that much. Although, I haven't been super impressed with what I've seen from Costa. I want to say that as well. He did lose his UFC debut against Amir Albazi, got finished in the 3rd round. Albazi is obviously a very, very tough flyweight fighter. Before that, a couple knockout victories as well. So I think that he should look to try to land some big shots on the feet. And even if it goes down to the mat, maybe Jimmy Flick is fishing for those submissions too much. Costa can land some big shots there, and maybe we see a finish. Maybe you want to target the under in this fight, check under type bets in this fight. Flick has been shown to be a finisher with the subs as well. Like I said, he's a win or die type of fighter. So I think the under and finish props are what you want to kind of look at, to say the least. But I think Costa, or I know Costa is the fighter that I'm going to side with here. I need to see Flick really show that he has returned to the fight game. And that fight against Charles Johnson was not him showing that at all. He was not checked in for that fight. He was not there in the arena that night. And I need to see more than that before I could back Flick in this spot. Now, if Flick would have been coming into this fight and you were not having that Charles Johnson fight and there was no type of retirement, he comes into this fight as a big time favorite. So you understand that too. The betting line's kind of funky. That retirement and that energy Charles Johnson performance really knocked his stock down. So give me Costa here. And as far as the betting line goes, I think there might be some knowledge here on Costa. People are liking what they're seeing from the kid there. So I wouldn't really want to touch it if it goes too high. Flick is still a dangerous dude. Pat Sabatini coming off a very tough loss, taking on Lucas Almeida, a fighter that's really been putting it together as of recently. Two big UFC victories since making his debut. And, Lucas Almeida has shown that he's a very tough fighter. He's a scrappy striker. And, he's going to go out here and look to land some big shots on Pat Sabatini, who was just knocked out by Damon Jackson. Of course, Pat Sabatini going into that fight as the favorite, as he has as of recently. People understand that his wrestling and overall grappling is a major threat to anybody in the division. Once he gets going and hits it into gear 2, 3, 4, 5, he takes over fights, and definitely needs to work on his striking. That's definitely an avenue of his fight game that's lacking. And I think that Almeida will have potential to land some big shots on the feet. And I think that Pat Sabatini needs to make sure that he is very defensively sound as this fight kicks off on the feet. And he needs to make sure he sets up those takedowns down to the mat in a safe manner. Otherwise, we could be seeing him getting knocked out again. Lucas Almeida on a 2-fight winning streak after losing on Dana White's Contender Series. And he's actually only fought in the UFC once. That was in his last fight where he had the third-round knockout over Mike Trezano. That was a big fight for him. Before that, had a victory over a Jungle Fight. And that was coming off the loss that he had against Daniel Zuluber, which they were throwing down. That was a fun fight. But you know what? Zuluber, loses his UFC debut to Trey Ogen. I know he just bounced back with the victory over Orlando Venata. He shows some promise. I don't want to be too harsh on Zuluber there. He's still young. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe we should hold the performance that Almeida had against Zuluber in high regards. He threw down with him. He showed that he's a scrappy fighter here. And again, I think that there's a real avenue for Almeida to have success against Sabatini on the feet. But I want to be very clear. I'm very high on Sabatini's grappling. And unfortunately for him, in his last fight, he wasn't able to eventually get that fight down to the mat against Damon Jackson, where, Damon Jackson, obviously a very polished grappler in his own right, but I think that Sabatini would have still took over that fight with his pace. I think he's a better conditioned fighter than Damon Jackson. But again, this is the fight game. And if you make a mistake early on, and then you will pay for it. Okay. And again, Almeida is a fighter that can make you pay early on or later on. Getting knockouts late in fights. This is a dangerous proposition for Pat Sabatini. I'll tell you this much though. I think that this is going to be a bounce back performance for Pat Sabatini. I think that he's going to be very, very hungry going into this fight. And I think that it's time for him to get back in the win column. I think that him and his crew over there, I believe training out of Henzo Gracie Philly, or training over in Philly or whatnot. You guys know they had a lot of success as of recently. I think that they're going to be game plan for this fight very intelligently. They're going to be looking to avoid that early danger and just really make this a grappling type of match. And I think that Pat Sabatini will take over there. So, you take a look at Pat Sabatini's resume, 17 victories already at the age of 32, 11 submission victories. Almeida's been subbed 4 times, or excuse me, I'm sorry. He's never been subbed. Misread that. Excuse me. Has had 4 submission victories himself. He has never been subbed, has Lucas Almeida. But Pat Sabatini is not your typical opponent, right? I do believe he is a high caliber grappler. Almeida, 8 knockout victories out of those 14 victories. Again, the 4 subs. He has shown to be a finisher. Never has won a decision. And if this fight does go to a decision, I think it very much favors Pat Sabatini. If this fight goes 3 rounds, there will definitely be a good amount of time with Pat Sabatini on top of Lucas Almeida, in my opinion, or controlling his back or whatnot. So overall, I do like Pat Sabatini here. You guys know I've been pretty high on him. Obviously, the disappointing performance in his last fight, but I think he bounces back here. And this would be a big victory for him against a very dangerous Almeida. He is a minus 180 favorite right now. Opened up as a minus 185 on Bovada. So very, very slight line movement the other way. So people a little bit cautious with the performance that he just had, getting finished and whatnot. And I understand it. But you have to understand, Sabatini goes out here, dominates this fight with his grappling once again, and you're talking about a fighter that maybe goes into his next fight as a minus 350 favorite or something like that, depending on who the opposition is. But people love to back those types of fighters, and so do I. And in the right spots, I love to have the fighter that will be extremely conditioned and has that polished grappling background with his wrestling and the submission skills in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's what Pat Sabatini is. He's just a little bit of a he's a little bit of a fighter that you have to be cautious with when the fight's playing out on the feet and whatnot. He still needs to sharpen that up. But give me Pat Sabatini to pull off the decision. Earlier, I shared my thoughts on the UFC's middleweight division, as I stated that it is the most shallow division in the UFC. Well, when you're looking for new up and coming talent in the division, if you're looking for fresh faces in the division, these are two men that you can definitely look towards. Cristian Leroy Duncan. This is a young and up-and-coming fighter, only 27 years old, one of the top prospects coming out of the UK. I am very high on him. The very smooth and silky striker that's a true athlete and brings in some legit tools into the cage. When you talk about a guy that has almost an 80-inch wingspan in the middleweight division. And then Armen Petrosian, this is a fighter that has proven to be more than just a talented striker at this point in time. This is a fighter that has that striking background, but a guy that's definitely putting in the time to become a well-rounded fighter and to be a guy that's holding his own in the UFC's middleweight division. Real quick, I want to talk about Armen a little bit before we go deeper into CLD. Armen winning 2 of his first 3 UFC fights after coming off Dana White's Contender Series, where he had a victory there as well. Had that nasty knockout in the first round. Really, that was the fight that put him on the scene. People were really taking note of how dangerous of a striker he is. But getting a victory over Gregory Rodriguez in your UFC debut, a proven fighter in the division. Now, some people thought Gregory won that fight. No matter how you want to spin it, it was a very close fight, and he showcased his skills once again. He was out-grappled by Caio Bahalio. That's a tough one there, but Caio is a very, very talented fighter and a very tricky grappler. And then he went out there and took out AJ Dobson, another fighter that came off Dana White's Contender Series. So I do believe that Armen has some legit potential. He can give anybody a run for their money on the feet. He's very talented there. This is an excellent matchup here, and the fact that Cristian Leroy Duncan is just a very tricky striker as well. He's very diverse in the feet. I think that this fight will be very fun as it plays out there, and I think that it will play out on the feet. I think both guys will be more than willing to exchange there and see who the better striker is. CLD has a variety of knockouts throughout his career and a diverse amount of knockouts, all coming in all different types of ways. This guy will throw spinning attacks at you, spinning elbows. He has clean boxing. He mixes his leg kicks in nicely. You guys know I gave a massive free play on him as I was giving up, doing those free plays. I had that little segment going on, and I will give you guys another free play sometime in the future. But we had 2 plays locked in on CLD in his UFC debut. We had an underdog play on him to get the knockout there, and then we also took him to win that fight. And now, if you guys remember, he had that fight against Dusko Trzovic. Dusko got injured very early on in that fight. I know that CLD was working the leg kicks, but if you kind of rewatch the tape, he was attacking a different leg that actually got hurt. As far as Trzovic getting injured in that fight. So that was just kind of a weird one. The fight barely got to play out. And you know what? If you want to be skeptical about CLD, there's some room for that. We still haven't seen that he's a proven UFC fighter at this point in time. I do believe that he will be more than that. Or he will at the very least be a legit UFC fighter. I think that he is that type of guy. But if anybody has those types of question marks, it's understandable because we haven't seen it yet. But when it comes to Armen Petrosian, we've seen it. We've definitely seen it. Anyone that goes to a decision against a guy like Gregory Rodriguez, throwing down like that, edging a victory one way or another, even though it was close. I mean, he's a proven fighter. CLD still needs to prove more. And I'll tell you guys this much, though. I think that the ceiling on a CLD is much higher than Armen Petrosian. I think that CLD could end up being a much more dangerous striker than even the very polished striker in Armen Petrosian. CLD only 27 years old, a lot of room for growth. He's going to be coming into this fight with an 8.5-inch reach advantage. That's serious, okay? That's a serious reach advantage for a guy that knows how to strike from the outside. For a guy that has very polished boxing skills. As far as the height goes, he's actually an inch shorter, which that's crazy. We've been seeing a lot of guys that are shorter than their opponents, but having a longer reach in them, and in some cases a significant reach advantage. I find that to be very interesting, and I find that type of frame to be a frame that is more beneficial, right? It's a type of fighting frame that you see a lot of fighters thriving with that, right? And this guy CLD, I'm excited to see him have his legitimate first UFC fight here and put that under his belt. And I want to see this fight play out for a little bit longer and see what he's really about. But I like him. I do like him, like I said, and I'm going to be picking him here to get the job done. I think that this is a fight It can go a variety of ways, if we want to be honest. You definitely have to understand that Christian Leroy Duncan is a fight finisher. In 8 pro fights, he has 6 knockouts. Armen Petrosian losing 2 of his 9 fights, being knocked out once. I think it's very possible we see a knockout in this fight. I do see both of these men trading tit for tat on the feet. They're both very dangerous there. Although we haven't seen Christian Leroy Duncan finish up into this point, now we're talking about a step up in competition as well. So we'll see him tested a little bit more. So there's a very realistic possibility we see a knockout one way or another. I think CLD can possibly get that knockout over Armen here as well. Even though he's only been knocked out once in his pro career in 9 fights, not an overwhelming amount of data to go on there. But just this is a fight where I see them clashing on the feet and both of them looking to take over this fight. And it's just a very realistic possibility that somebody gets clipped with a big shot. If it goes to the judges' scorecards, I think that CLD can do enough to edge out a decision there as well. But it could play out close. And, I will pick CLD to win the fight. As I said, I like this kid a lot. But this is a fight where he's going to go out there and need to prove himself, right? He opened up as a -185 favorite. He's now settling in on Bovada.lv as a -155 favorite. So action coming in on Armen. And I think that is reasonable. All right. I think that this line should be closer. I think that the -185 line on Armen Petrosian is against him is a little ridiculous because he's proven to be a dangerous fighter. He's more proven in the octagon. And, as much as we like CLD, we like the flashy strikes and all that, there's question marks there. And the value would have to be on Armen at anywhere near +140, even +127. There's still more value there, in my opinion. This line should close to be a lot closer. I think that a more accurate line would be CLD -135, -130. With very slight underdog odds on Armen. And again, you're buying into the potential on CLD where we still need to see him pull that off in the UFC. But the athletic ability, the way he's so light on his feet, I think you see that all come into play and you see him use his athletic ability to get the job done here. We got a banger of a fight here. 2 guys that love to throw down, 2 guys that go out there and look to get the finish via knockout. You got the Brazilian Nicolas Mota taking on the Mexican Manuel Torres. Torres looking very good as of recently in limited action under the UFC banner, but going out there, getting a knockout over Colton England on Dana White's Contender Series, then following that up with a knockout victory over the dangerous striker Frank Camacho. I think there's no question that Manuel Torres is a very dangerous striker, still only 28 years old. He's going to look to be better every time he's out there, and he's going to look to continue to sharpen up his skills. The same could be said about Nicolas Mota. Now, this is a fighter that we're familiar with from a while back, right? If you guys remember, he was on the Ultimate Fighter Brazil way back in the day. He's been a fighter that has proven, like I said, to go out there and look to take his opponent's head off. And that's the type of guy he is. He's a little bit of kill or be killed. We've definitely seen him finished a couple of times throughout his career. We could run through his resume real quick. Some recognizable names taking him out, like the likes of the Hall of Famer Jim Miller, who's still doing his thing and has been, he knocked out Mota there in the second round. Mota was the favorite going into that fight. Just another head that Jim Miller could put on his shelf. Another young and hungry fighter that was looking to go out there and take Jimbo out and just wasn't able to have that type of success. After that, followed it up with a knockout victory in his own right over Cameron Van Camp, a very green striker, a guy that's more of like a scrappy dude with a grappling background. So Mota was able to capitalize on him there. Manuel Torres will be more of a threat on the feet back to him. I think this is a much more evenly matched fight. We talked about how he's knocking dudes out, knockouts over Cesar Balmaceda, knockouts over Joe Selecki. Check that out. That was a knockout over Joe Selecki over in the I don't know where that fight actually took place there, the 864 Fighting Championship, some very small time there, but we know Joe Selecki's a stud. That was one of the few losses he's ever taken that was against Mota. Knockouts over Paul Machado. You talk about some of those losses that he's taken, knocked out over there in Chuto, Brazil there. He was also submitted on the Ultimate Fighter by Glauco Franco, and also was submitted early on in his career too against Claudio Marcelino. So some submission losses on his resume. I'm not too worried about that here. You take a look at Torres. He does have 4 submission victories, but I don't think that Torres is as much of a threat down on the mat as maybe some of the numbers that we dive into there would say. I don't see that threat there as much. I think that this is a fight where they're going to throw down on the feet, and I think that whoever lands that precision shot early on or within this fight at any time is going to be the guy that gets their hand raised. Whoever controls the distance, right? I mean, that's kind of like a cliche saying. You hear that all the time, but controlling the distance with their footwork and just kind of being the bigger dog out there, or the dog with more heart, is going to be the fighter that takes this fight. I think this is going to be a true dog fight. I like that analogy. I like this fight. I'm taking Manuel Torres. I think I'm high on his boxing skills. I like Mota as well. Mota has that tricky southpaw stance and throws heavy hooks. I think that he could also potentially get that knockout there. This is a fight that I think we potentially see a finish here. At the very least, I hope that these guys really go out there and throw it on. I think that that's a very likely scenario. I like Manuel Torres, though. I edge Manuel Torres. You'll have almost a 3-inch reach advantage there. He's a little bit more of the lengthy fighter, and he's crisp with the striking. At times, he's shown to be a little bit more technical, if you will. I feel like he throws his shots a little bit more straight. I like that. His hooks are nice and crisp. Mota has that power, but he gets a little, I don't want to say sloppy. He's a little bit more wild with his attack at times, and I think that Manuel Torres can have some success here. So I will be siding with Manuel Torres to get the better of a striking duel. Right now, Manuel Torres is a -165 favorite on Bovada.lv. That line opened up at -185, so we've been seeing that dip, and it did even touch a -155. And again, I just think that this is another line that's kind of correcting itself because it opened up too high. On Bovada.lv, this is a fight that's definitely closer than us saying that Manuel Torres is a -185 favorite, because I don't believe that to be the case. The -135 to -155 range is much more accurate. I do like Manuel Torres to get the job done here, but that's how you should be analyzing this line. You're going to want to get that line lower. Otherwise, there's more value on Mota if people are just going to go all in on the Mexican and Torres. But I liked what I've seen from both them. So another fun fight on the main card there. In the co-main event, we got Muslim Salikov taking on Nicholas Dalby. Two fighters that are very much aging. Both these guys nearing 40 years old in the welterweight division too. Not necessarily the heaviest of weights. I mean, this is a division where it's really hard to get away with it at that age. But nevertheless, I think both these fighters are still very dangerous. Both of them have very respectable resumes: 19-3, 21-4, essentially on Dalby's part. Dalby, one of the first fighters to go out there and take out Darren Till, I think, right? Or did that fight go to a draw? Might have gone to a draw, but that's where he really made his name. Left the UFC for a little bit, came back. I mean, Dalby is a guy that always comes in phenomenal shape, even though he's up there in age. I mean, this guy is ripped, he's shredded, good cardio. He's always doing all these wild types of breathing techniques as he's striking. Very light on his feet. He's very light on his feet. He's a well-rounded fighter. He'll be using a lot of footwork, jumping around. He'll be doing his little pitter-patter in and out. This isn't necessarily a guy that looks to take your head off with his hands at the very least, right? With his boxing skills. This is a guy that looks to go out there and touch you up. Muslim Salikov, on the other hand, I mean, this is a fighter. He goes in there, in my opinion, he goes out there and he goes to take your head off. This guy throws some serious power with their strikes. He's very technical. We've seen him go out there and really decapitate some fighters before. Hasn't always been the most active fighter. Coming off a knockout victory over Andre Fiallo, another technical striker, but a guy that's really been on the decline. We've seen him go out there and get a brutal knockout over Nordine Taleb. Went out there and knocked out Ricky Rainey back in the day as well. Knocked out Melvin Gillard, even outside the UFC. He had a good amount of knockouts before even making his way to the UFC. I mean, this is a guy that has a striking background first and foremost, and then after that, he looks to round out his game. But this is a guy that's going to go out there, and if you look to strike with him, you're going to have a tough time. A lot of guys in the division are going to have a tough time, and I'm interested to see how Dalby deals with that. Again, I think he'll use a lot of movement, a lot of activity. I think that we'll see Dalby shooting some takedowns and whatnot, just looking to mix things up as he does. But we have seen Dalby take damage throughout his UFC career. I mean, this is a guy that is I shouldn't say he is there to be hit, because he's moving around. It's not like he's necessarily just stagnant, but he's lacking a little bit defensively. We've seen that at times. Absorbing 3.35 strikes per minute, which isn't a bad number, but that's a whole strike more than what we've seen Salikov absorbing. Salikov is very technical, and as far as the amount landed, Dalby slightly outlanding Muslim. Nothing too crazy going on there. 30% takedown accuracy for Dalby, not a great number either. And Salikov has had a 77% takedown defensive rate. So I think that he should be able to keep this fight standing. But I do think that it will be Dalby, of course, that will be the guy looking to mix things up more so. If he could push the pace on him and out cardio Salikov and try to out volume him, that's the avenue that Dalby wants to go. But overall, I like the power, the crispness on the shots of Salikov, and just the technical abilities there. I like that to be enough for him to get the job done. And just again, the fact that Salikov is getting up there in age, he's now 39 years old. Dalby's right behind him. He's 38 there. Dalby does have a nice wingspan for the division as well. He'll have a 4.5-inch reach advantage. We've seen him come in to a good amount of his fights with that reach advantage. But Muslim Salikov, he knows how to work his footwork and whatnot. I think he looks to set up a big shot, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see that knockout come. I mean, he's a fighter that out of 19 of his victories, 11 of them have come by way of knockout. Okay, that's the vast majority of his victories there. So do not be surprised if we see that. But you do want to understand that Dalby has been a guy that's been very durable. But when you talk about getting up there in age and whatnot, 38 years old, it only takes one, and that damage does accumulate over the years. Dalby's been putting in work. He's been battling it out for years. A lot of toughly contested fights, combined decisions against guys like D-Rod. And what else? We could talk about some of the work that he's done as of recently, but just took out Warley Alves, a fighter that has questionable cardio. Claudio Silva, a guy that's very much up there in age too and has slowed down. The loss to Tim Means before that, and Tim Means has been looking horrendous as of recently. And you know what? Jesse Ronson, let's not forget, Jesse Ronson knocked Dalby out too. That fight was overturned due to a drug test. He submitted him, but he hurt him first before pulling off that sub, reminiscent to the Rat and Roosevelt Roberts, if you guys catch my reference there too. But hurting him and then subbing him was overturned due to a drug test. But nevertheless, he was finished there. He potentially lost to D-Rod. That was a close fight, and then he loses to Means. So, I think Salikov can handle this fight. I really do. But again, I don't want you guys to misunderstand my feelings on the fight. It is a close fight, but I like Salikov. I do like Salikov here. Let's see what kind of line we're talking about here. Muslim Salikov right now. Wow, look at this. Check this out. So opens up as a -185 favorite on Bovada.lv. It dips down to a -210 line, and then it creeps back up to the -195 line. But overall, the line trending towards Salikov's way. So people having their questions about Dalby, similarly to what we kind of talked about here. So give me Muslim Salikov. The knockout prop or the under is potentially live as well. And two aged fighters that still have a little bit left to give to the game. Should be a good one. We got the biggest favorite on the card, Arman Tsarukyan, the number 8th ranked lightweight fighter in the world, taking on Joaquim Silva. Silva taking this fight on short notice, like the warrior that he is. Nothing but respect to him. Of course, Renato Moicano was supposed to be the initial opponent. I think we would all agree that was a fight that we much have rather seen. Silva, he's a talented dude. He's a fighter that has been very inactive over the years. We've seen him have some big time performances, going out there finishing guys like Jared Gordon back in the day. But again, didn't really stay that active in the fight game. And since his return, he's definitely had some ups and downs. And of course, if he wasn't taking this fight on short notice, there's no way that he's getting matched up with a guy like Arman Tsarukyan, who's ranked number 8 right now. Arman Tsarukyan also potentially could be even ranked even higher. A lot of people feel that he got the bad end of a decision against Gamrot, Mateusz Gamrot. I thought that Arman won that fight. It was a very close fight, but at the end of the day, I thought he got that job done, and he was so young at the time too. That's what's so interesting about him, because his ceiling is still so high. You see him over here putting in some work over at American Top Team. What can I say about Arman Tsarukyan that you guys don't already know? I think the most impressive performance of his career was taking a short notice fight against Islam Makhachev at the age of 22 and making it the most competitive fight that we've seen play out against Islam. Of course, Islam was also knocked out at one point in time. But besides that, I mean, we knew what kind of fighter he was ever since that day. He's had some big time performances as well since then. We can briefly talk about those. Coming off a victory against Damir Ismagulov, one of the dark horses of the division, one of the real dogs that's under the radar. Thought he took out Gamrot. That's a big win. Joel Alvarez is a stud. You saw Christos Zhalgas getting that victory just recently, getting hit a knockout there. He went out there and knocked him out in the first round like it was nothing. Victories over Matt Frevola, who at the time, that fight didn't look like that big of a deal, but Frevola has shown to be a very solid fighter in the division. Davi Ramos, a dangerous BJJ player. OAM getting a victory over him. I mean, the OAM's been really having a lot of success outside the UFC over in PFL. And then we talked about that Islam fight. So, I mean, when you really dive into what the work he's been doing and just understanding the performances that he's been putting on and the skill set that he possesses, you know how good Arman Tsarukyan is. And that there's no wonder why the betting line is what it is, which we'll get to in a second. Just real quick, Joaquim Silva, a dangerous striker. He has the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, but for whatever reason, just never pulls off any subs, only one submission throughout his career. This is a guy that likes to trade on the feet. And, you know, I think that gives him the best chance that he possibly could have in this fight. He needs to clip Arman Tsarukyan with a big shot, and we need to see like a shocker type of performance. He just has to go out there, and I don't want to say be lucky, but he's got to let the fight game give him that opportunity. If he could just clip Arman Tsarukyan, two guys trading, and maybe Arman makes one little mistake. Other than that, I see Arman Tsarukyan sticking to him like glue, controlling him down on the mat, ground and pounding him, getting the better of the striking exchanges. I actually love the body kicks that Arman throws. I like his boxing skills too. He's very quick. He's very ferocious. And you guys know we're picking Arman Tsarukyan to get the job done here. We won't go on too much about this fight because, like I said, we're talking about a huge favorite. Right now on Bovada.lv, he's a minus 900. Line opened up at minus 650. Quick action going his way. On other books, he's as high as a minus 1100. And that's the type of line you should expect. When this fight closes, Arman Tsarukyan probably will be a minus 1200, maybe a minus 1400. We're talking about a huge favorite here. And I think that Arman Tsarukyan should go out here and look to get a finish and make a statement here. And Arman Tsarukyan, a dark horse in the division, a guy that could potentially be holding that gold in the near future, if you ask me. Hey guys, real quick, if you're looking for a new sports book, I recommend you check out Bovada.lv. More importantly, if you could, reach out to me first and foremost so I can send you over my referral link. You sign up through my referral link, you're going to get an added deposit bonus to your account. And if you sign up through my link, I'm going to hook you guys up with a bunch of free plays and help support you guys through the website, any questions you have or whatnot. So if you guys are interested, shoot me a message, whether it's email, Instagram, or Twitter, whatever it is. Here we go. We got the main event. Marvin Vettori taking on Cannonier, the number 3 and number 4 ranked middleweight fighters in the world here. Even though I've said my little thing towards the beginning of how I was disappointed in their performances when they had that chance to fight for the belt. I mean, at the end of the day, these are proven fighters. They are deserving of their ranking, essentially. I mean, when you take a look at what else there is to offer in the division, I mean, these guys they're towards the top of the heap. It is what it is. Marvin Vettori still only 29 years old, hasn't even cracked the 30 mark. So obviously he still has some time to chase the gold. I mean, I don't know if he'll ever do that, but he's a well-rounded fighter. He's coming off a pretty big victory, if you ask me. A little bit of a controversial victory against Roman Dolidze, but I think that a lot of that controversy was coming from the mouths of people that had action on Roman Dolidze. They got him at dog value, and it was a close fight. But at the end of the day, Roman lost that fight. He definitely lost 2 rounds. I think Roman took one of the rounds there. I mean, you check the significant strike stats for that fight as well. I mean, outlanding Roman almost 40 strikes there, and really. Vettori actually was very sound defensively in that fight, using good footwork, and he was very cerebral in that fight. I believe he fought a very intelligent fight there, avoiding some of the dangers that Roman possesses there. So I give him credit for that victory. It wasn't the type of victory where he went out there and just kind of dominated his opponent and was working him in different aspects of the game. We know Vettori's a very well-rounded fighter. It was a different type of fight, but I think it was a very solid performance, to say the least. Vettori does have pretty high fighter IQ. And then we go over to the Killer Gorilla, who we know has that big-time power, can definitely hurt you and put you out. I think that he's potentially live for a knockout in a fight like this. I mean, 2 guys trading in the middleweight division. Cannonier has proven that he carries some serious power, even at the age that he's at. We've seen him battle in the heavyweight division, the light heavyweight division, I believe all the way down to the middle. But remember when he used to carry a lot of weight, it was great to see him drop down in weight, chisel himself up. And he's been a fun fighter to watch for the most part, but not in his last fight. or, excuse me, maybe not his last fight, not in his fight against Israel Adesanya. Then he had the victory over Sean Strickland, which, you know what? You could say that fight as well. He was not really that active in that fight. I thought Sean Strickland won that fight. That was a very close one, but I did feel Strickland should have won that fight. And the majority of the MMA media and whatnot believe the same. I do believe if you pull that up. But the Israel Adesanya fight, he was completely frozen. I didn't like that. I think it was clear he was on his way to losing that fight, and I would have liked to have seen him push the pace a little bit more so and go out on his shield. I mean, this was a guy that is probably never going to get another opportunity to fight for the belt just based off his age. I mean, he still potentially could, but you guys know what I'm saying. It was just so unlikely. I thought that he should have really capitalized on that opportunity and just go out there. You guys know the way to take Izzy, to defeat Izzy, and that's either to be much larger than him and be in a different weight class like Jan Blachowicz and use your grappling, or it's to land that big shot on him, bring the fight and try to hurt him. And I thought Cannonier kind of was slacking there, so a little disappointed in him there, but he'll have a chance to right all that. If he goes out there, starches Vettori, his stock goes right up the roof again. I mean, he's coming into this fight holding that ranking still, the number 4 ranking. So when you're in the top 5, it only takes one big win for you to be right in the mix once again. This is a big fight here for the division. I like Marvin Vettori. I do in the sense I feel that I could see him being a little bit more active in this fight as it plays out once again. He has a high fighter IQ. I could see him kind of mixing things up. Cannonier is not easy to be taken down, but I just think that Vettori will somewhat best him a little bit in all aspects of the game. And I definitely want to go over some numbers with you guys here real quick. We're talking about the main event fight here. I mean, significant strikes wise, Vettori has shown to be a little bit more active at 4.38 landed per minute compared to a flat 4 strikes landed per minute on Cannonier. And Vettori has absorbed slightly less at 3.65 strikes compared to Cannonier's 3.86. In the grappling aspect, Vettori having more success with his offensive wrestling throughout the years. His takedown defense has proven to be a little bit better as well. I like the fact that he's the younger fighter. Obviously, he's 29, whereas Cannonier, maybe you kind of chalk up some of that the inactivity in his fights based on the fact he's getting up there in age too. Maybe he's questioning his cardio a little bit. Maybe that's a little bit of a reach, but you guys know what I'm saying. He's 39 years old, on the verge of being 40, and you can't really be crazy about backing a fighter at that age in a spot like this. Not to say that it's out of the realm, but statistically, the age factor is a great benefit for Vettori here. I'm going to go at Marvin Vettori. I'm going to say that he wins a decision. I'm going to say that he just does enough to edge out at least 3 rounds, most likely 4 rounds in this fight. I could see Cannonier having success on one of these rounds, stuffing some takedowns, landing some heavier shots. And that's something that you want to keep an eye on as well. Cannonier probably will be the guy landing the bigger shots in this fight, but I don't think that they'll be at enough volume. I think that the volume of Vettori's will outweigh those couple of big shots that Cannonier will hit once in a while throughout this fight. So let's go slide over to the betting line, where you will see on Bovada.lv, Marvin Vettori opened up as a -170. It's coming back down. He's now a -150. So the line closing a little bit. I would like that as far as backing Vettori. I like that. If that line continues to trend towards that way, I think that's you might be able to get a bargain. If that was to go down to like a -135, 130, that'd be great. Hopefully people are feeling Cannonier and people are starting to continue to push on him. I don't know if that'll be the case though. I probably expect that line to start bouncing back towards Vettori's way. I think he'll settle in as like a -170 favorite. Well, I think it'll go back to -170. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, Marvin Vettori to win a decision. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC Vegas 75. Remember, if you're looking to work with me for my official plays, do not hesitate to reach out. This is a card that I like. There's definitely spots that I like. And as of recently, especially when there's cards that I like, they tend to be profitable. Of course, not every card's going to be profitable. It's pretty much impossible to do. And a lot of those cards that were a little tricky, we kind of knew they were tricky going into them. This is a card that I like, so just take that into consideration. I like our spots here. Gotta leave you guys with some parting words here. I hope you guys all have a great week going into this fight. Check this out. Let's see if I could kind of get this out the correct way. Something that crossed my mind. You guys know these parting words. I just try to talk about things that I think about as I'm moving through life while I'm here. And something I was thinking of, I was watching some old home videos, me and the family and whatnot, and sometimes when you look back at your youth and you see it on camera, it's really amazing to see. But you kind of understand things or you kind of see things from different aspects. And sometimes when you think, let me say it like this. Sometimes maybe some of you guys are like dwelling on certain things that you wish were better growing up with your family, certain things that you wish you had better, right? Whether you come from a tougher neighborhood, a small house, whether you didn't have a father around, say there's certain things that you were lacking growing up. Sometimes you could dwell on that and kind of let it be something that's kind of taking over the thoughts of growing up and all the pleasant times you had and all the benefits and all the positive things that you had growing up. So think about that sometimes. And I think if you watch some old videos and you kind of take note and you're looking around and you see certain things that are really nice, certain things that were really beneficial, and certain things that other people might have not had, I think a lot of you guys would be surprised that there's a lot more positives out there than negatives. So of course, it's only human nature to kind of dwell sometimes on things that you wish you would have had, or things that kind of upset you throughout the years. But think about what I'm saying, and if you guys have the ability to get to some old tapes or whatever, if you could kind of reflect on your youth. It's hard as you get older to kind of remember exactly how things were. You know, I'm watching certain things and I remember these times, but then you actually see it and you see yourself young and you see the environment, and you could see some things that are really pleasant and things that you were really lucky to have. I guarantee you, all of you guys, even some of you guys that come from some tough times and tough situations, I guarantee you'll see what I'm talking about. Just kind of, when you watch it, it just brings a positive energy out, and you see all these positive things, and it feels good, and it makes you not take life for granted, and it makes you appreciate things. So I don't know if I worded that the best, because it's just a feeling that I had. Maybe I will articulate that better in another video, because it's a deep thought that just kind of crossed through my mind. I think I could do better with that, but I'll bring that up again. But think about what I'm saying. Try to dabble with that. But you guys know, I appreciate all you guys for tuning in, and another fight card is ahead of us. I appreciate all your guys' support so much. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, catch me on all my social media. Losing my voice here. We've been chirping on the mic here for about an hour or so. So, all right, guys, I think I'm gonna sign out. Signing out. Tell her.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.